and with local authorities a new investment model based less on membership numbers that sports can lay claim to, and much more around what the surveys are telling us people want to do more of, and the evidence in the population about demand to do more sports. So the money is going to follow the direction that the Minister is giving Sport Wales in a very clear fashion, and that I think will be worked through and delivered over the course of this year, and you can be questioning us on it this time next year, I'm sure.
Okay, David?
Well, since you've talked about free swimming, let's go on to that one, because as you know, Minister, I've had an issue regarding this decision. I understand the argument you just put forward that the review gave only 6%, but one of the questions I would ask is why didn't the Welsh Government take a decision to look at why it was only 6% and how we could increase that rather than actually cutting the funding. I understand the review actually talked about the actual cost, an estimate of the actual cost of providing free swimming as a maximum of 1.5 million, therefore you've cut 1.5 million. But as a consequence of that cut, we are seeing cuts in provision to the over 60s. So in a sense, I can't match the two together because there is a cut in provision. And I'm sure you've got evidence of that from across the local authorities, how the provision has changed. One of the Welsh Government's priorities, according to your own written submission, is getting more people active at every stage of their life, including when they retire. How does the cut in funding actually deliver the increasing people activities when you're reducing the options? Now, you say the options are available to people. I've yet to see an increase in choice to people as a consequence of that cut and the reduction in the system and in provision. So can you tell me how the money is going to give you that wider choice as a consequence of cutting the free swimming?
The free swimming budget for 2020 onwards is 1.6 million. 1.5 in distributable grants plus 100,000 for promotion, monitoring and independent evaluation of the spend. And this is the focus that I have, and it's a focus which I've been recommended to take with Sport Wales and supported by my officials, and it's an approach I take to all the public spending for which I have responsibility. This must be seen to be effective, and because after all we are promoting physical activity as a whole, and what I'm looking for is an increase in physical activity. So of the remaining 1.4%, 750,000 will be utilised on the Healthy and Active Fund, and there are continuing discussions with Sport Wales and with health promotion colleagues in terms of the allocating of another 650k. So this funding is going directly into promoting physical activity across the board, because that's what the problem I was given by Sport Wales. This figure, which I've already quoted, that of the over 60s, only 6% were taking part in that particular activity. So it was an attempt, I think, to offer people support for one kind of physical activity rather than give people the choice. And that's the change of direction which we've undertaken. So it is not a cut in the overall promotion of physical activity. I would never countenance such a thing.
Well, okay, let's take that argument. It is a cut to a particular form of activity because it's a cut in funding to a particular form. And as a consequence of that, there are considerations as to how that form of activity, swimming, is supported on a wider basis, because obviously everyone who knows, particularly local authority, will understand that swimming pools being kept open is not necessarily a profitable business. It's something that has to be subsidised because that's an important activity, but it applies to all age groups. So have you done an estimate as to what implications this would have on swimming per se, because this is a cut to swimming, because then that limits not just the free swimming activities, but maybe other opportunities for people to take up swimming in the normal time, because this is quite a dramatic cut to many pools which are relying upon some of the funding.
Yes, but you haven't, nobody has convinced me that this opening out of the funding to, as I've just described, to a broad range of physical activities will actually result in a reduction in physical activity. There may be a change in the way that people choose to undertake their activity, but I'm not convinced that this will result to a diminution in the overall participation of the population, particularly the over 60s, in physical activity. David, you want to?
Do you have evidence, therefore, which says, actually, if I take this away, they'll do that?
Well, no, that's not. We couldn't possibly know, could we? I mean, we take the advice that we see, and we look at what is likely to be positive. And I go back to my original figure. I mean, 6% of the potential beneficiaries is not good enough in terms of use of public resource. David?
I think the situation facing the Minister was 1/7 of all the money we gave for Sport Wales was being used in the Free Swimming Initiative, in addition to the money that Swim Wales would have got as a national governing body from Sport Wales. So it is a significant proportion of the Welsh Government budget for sport was going into this initiative. It delivered for 6% of over 60s who used it, and an increasingly small number of under 16s who used it. That money's been, or half of that money's been retained for free swimming. The priority has been given to local authorities to address particularly young people from disadvantaged communities, and it comes back to the previous question that we had on equality of access, but also to retain a free swimming offer. The scheme has ultimately been delivered by local authorities. You know, they own the pools. Some local authorities have responded very well, very imaginatively, actually have worked more on a marginal costing basis. You know, once a pool is open, it costs very little, if anything, for an additional swimmer to use it. Other local authorities have reacted in the way that you suggest, by sort of slashing provision. So I think Sport Wales are going through an exercise now with local authorities to understand why some have reacted in a different way to others. The money is being retained and the money for sport is actually increasing, but we're convinced it will be used to deliver more opportunities for more people. We could have, as you say, gone through an exercise of trying to increase the usage of the Free Swimming Initiative. If we double the usage, we'd have got to 12% of the cohort using it. It still wouldn't have seemed a particularly impactful way of using, you know, 1/10 of the overall sport budget. We're working with the health department at the moment to jointly use some of the money that we will repurpose to come up with a wider physical activity offer for over 60s. And the Deputy Minister and the Minister for Health will make some announcements on that shortly. Sport Wales are talking to the local authorities now, because they again will have to deliver it. It'll be their facilities. So I think much of the money, if not more of the money, will end up going into local authorities to support their leisure facilities, but we'll have a wider offering to over 60s. You know, some people, many people just don't want to swim. No matter how free you make it, they still won't want to swim.
Can I ask a question? That might be the case where quite a lot of my constituents have complained about the situation. Can I ask a question is when will you be able to provide an evaluation of the changes that have been introduced as a consequence of the funding changes? And also an evaluation as to whether there has been an increase in uptake of other activities as a consequence, which is what your ambition is.
This is what we're asking Sport Wales to do. It's part of the monitoring of the whole change of funding.
I appreciate you asking them, but I said, when can we see an evaluation?
Well, we are working with them on this, and when we have that information, we will publish it, obviously, and you can have a debate on it. You know, I want people to discuss the priorities that we've decided on, but so far I am absolutely convinced that the move towards widening the participation of physical activity requires a greater choice, and it wasn't about funding one particular activity over others.
I appreciate you talking about, we can have a discussion about this, but I'm sure the government must have a position as to a date by which it will expect an evaluation to be available to you.
So the changes went live from the 1st of October. We've asked Sport Wales to be much more directional and authoritative in their funding of local authorities for this scheme, and to work with local authorities to do periodic evaluations. So we would expect an initial view after 6 months, another one after 12 months. We will still be putting £1.5 million into free swimming, and we want that money to be much more rigorously evaluated in future than it has been in the past. We hope that a new replacement wider activity scheme will be live very soon in the new financial year when the budget becomes available. And again, we will expect that to be rigorously evaluated, and so we understand what the take-up is. You know,
So is it fair to say then by October, the end of this year, after 12 months, you should be in a situation where they have completed their 12-month evaluation, and by the end of this year, you should be able to report on what that evaluation?
Well, no, I wouldn't commit to doing that, because this also involves ensuring that we have a sufficient spend in the budget of Natural Resources Wales and the support of Health Promotion Wales to make it clear that there are all these other options of physical activity in the landscape, which is a very simple thing to do. You just get out and walk, whether it's in parkland or whether it's in hill country or wherever people happen to live. And I'm very strongly encouraging the development of walking groups. And I walked Cardiff and Vale. I walked in Treorchy with a wonderful group of people up there. So I think this is a way forward where people will participate in their own communities in physical activity. And so that is a socially useful thing as well as physically useful for people.
I can go further and further, but I'll stop there because I know time is limited.
Yes, and but luckily we've got our leader in agility terms in being able to be succinct. So Jane is going to round off the session with a final couple of questions.
Good morning, Minister. Following the draft budget, this committee expressed our serious concerns about the sustainability